And there we are. How are you doing, folks? Welcome to our audience already on YouTube, to Facebook, and to Twitter. This is a special edition of the Simpa Life Weekly Live. I'm joined by several special guests this evening to discuss the PCC and local elections. The PCCs, for if you don't know, also sometimes known as the Police Crime Victims Commissioner, depending on which region you are in the country, are an elected position of individuals that are there to kind of be a line and connection bridge between the public and between the policing services and the individual constabularies. Upcoming next week on the 6th of May is the delayed election from last year because of obviously COVID and lockdown and everything else for what I believe will be the third PCC election. It's obviously quite a new position, but it is already showing great deal of potential. Obviously Durham, my neck of the woods. Ron Hogg, within his first term, created a space for a checkpoint scheme. They deprioritized sort of cannabis cultivation after then already deprioritizing its possession. This then led to quite an interesting period of time in Durham, and then several of the police forces took up this position. This then led to what some in the media have termed a postcode lottery, meaning that in some areas you will be ignored by your police, or even released if they find you in possession. To some other areas you will be actively targeted simply for the smell or for your association to a certain community. The reason that I wanted to bring especially this bunch of people together this evening is to discuss the potential for these elections to affect the average cannabis consumer, and for them to discuss on how participation within local election, participation within especially these PCC elections, given the traditionally incredibly low turnout, means that we as cannabis consumers really could have an effect on this election and could see more progressive policies in our local area. So with all that in mind, I will introduce our guests this evening, or rather actually I will throw you over to themselves to introduce themselves. Make a sentence of that yourselves. Too many yourselves. Anyway, first up this evening, we have Deborah Willoughby. Debs, would you please introduce yourselves to our audience?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thank you for inviting me to be here this evening on this podcast. My name is Deborah Wilbee, and you can call me Debs. So where do I start? I guess maybe about 10 years ago or so, a manager, over 10 years now, a manager of mine said to me, do you know what you'd make? A really good band manager or a politician. And at the time, I didn't really know how to take it. I actually thought he was being insulting, but no, I think it was one of those, like, I don't know, make of that what you will. But here I find myself today, and I'm standing as an independent candidate in my town and unitary upcoming local election. So I don't know, should I go into what's brought me here now?
A little bit, yeah, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. So I ran a pub. This is my hometown. I grew up here. I haven't lived here all my life. I've worked abroad. And I also came back here to my hometown and ran a pub. So I really got to know my community. I enjoyed being a part of my community, a responsible licensee as well, which seemingly can be a bit of a rarity these days. I don't know what anyone else's experience of that can be, but I took my role really seriously as a licensee of alcohol and made sure that everyone, whoever they were, came into my pub and had a really good time. And I did that for as long as I could, 5 years, and then I went off in my little camper van and I found Hemp. Well, I started reading about CBD because this was like 2017, and I'd had an interest in cannabis for about 15 years myself, and the CBD started coming out and I was like, what is this? Okay, this is interesting. CBD is from hemp. Hemp can be grown under license in the UK. So I just Googled hemp farm UK and Hempen came up, and they were looking for volunteers for harvest. I was like, this is amazing. This is literally just what I was looking for. So I turned up, and I thought I was just going to stay for a bit of harvest, maybe for a couple of weeks. I ended up staying for 6 months. I got fully involved. I immersed myself in hemp legislation, law, quickly worked out that what we were doing was possibly veering on the activist side of things, because, I mean, we had the hemp license, but pretty sure we didn't have the, you know, the other necessaries to be making the oil that we were doing, but we were doing it. We were making organic, excellent quality oil that we grew ourselves, produced ourselves. We were selling it up and down the country to people, thousands of people, customers, followers, you know, forging the industry, really. One of the pioneers of UK CBD, if not the, really, you know, out there doing it. But they, you know, they had their story, they lost their license, they had to destroy their crop. And it's really one of those things that politicized me, and finding out that the UK is the world's largest producer of cannabis-based medicine. We all know that, GW Pharmaceutical, I'm not going to bore us, but that again is one of those key things that politicized me. And this is all the while, you know, Jeremy Corbyn's rising, you know, to his, where he was, popularity wise. And this all sort of like got me going over the last few years. Now, my hometown is a Conservative stronghold, has been since inception of government, of whatever this thing is that we do, democracy. And so it's, a lot of people have lost their way here. What's the point? There's absolutely no one that I want to vote for. They win this thing with like 100 of votes, not thousands. There's 20,000 people that live in just this town of mine, and they win it with 400 votes. That is criminal. That's not democracy. That's, I don't do maths very well, but the percentage is very small. Let me tell you that, of the people that are having a voice, playing a role in this so-called democracy in society, and this so-called thing that we're doing together, trying to build a better world. I'm not going to say that bit because that's rubbish, but you know, there's something to be said for coming together. So what I want to do really, and what I want to show anyone listening, is whoever you are, it doesn't matter who you are. People think that what I'm doing is brave. I mean, possibly, but just get out there, just go and do it. If you're sick of seeing the same old faces doing the same old blah, 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 we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll do the other. I was boring myself moaning about it, you know. I'm like, God, they're awful. Look at the roads, look at this, we can't do this. Get up and do something about it, because you're only going to give yourself a headache moaning about it. So that's where I am. That's what's led me to here. And yeah, I hope I can just even encourage one more person at the next time, because it's possibly only going to be 3 years away that we can do it. If we can build a really strong independent candidate movement away from party politics, then I'll be happy.
Excellent. Thank you for that introduction. I'll throw you over next to Mr. Neil Woods. Would you like to introduce yourself, sir?
Yeah, thanks, Simpa. I'm a former undercover police officer who now campaigns for a reform of our drug laws as part of the Law Enforcement Action Partnership. So I'm a board member of LEAP in the USA and also in Europe, and quite regularly a spokesperson for LEAP UK. I've got a particular interest in the Police and Crime Commissioner elections, because essentially what reform we do have in the UK has been largely driven by certain personalities who are police and crime commissioners in the last few years. We only really have this phrase of de facto decriminalisation because of the work of Ron Hogg and his staff. That's where this whole discussion came from. And you know, as a police officer, I was still in the police when the idea of police and crime commissioners started, and I was horrified by it. I thought it was a bloody awful idea, because to me it was just bringing more politics into policing just seemed like terrible plan. But I've since been completely proved wrong, because what it has allowed is local innovation, and where you have innovation, you have comparative policies. So we are now able to say that the system in Durham works more efficiently than the system in Surrey, because the stats are there. And that innovation has allowed political movement that's moved way beyond central politics, way beyond it, which arguably makes the police and crime commissioners the single most important elections at this time for the purposes of drug policy. So this is crucial. And it's also an opportunity, like Deborah alluded to, for the police and crime commissioners. Hardly anyone votes. And, you know, the cannabis community is a huge percentage of our population, a huge percentage. Interestingly, we haven't got the results of the recent census out yet. But from the last census, the percentage of people who self-identified as homosexual, well, significantly lesser percentage than we generally accept of people who use cannabis either medicinally or recreationally. So you're a bigger minority. And, you know, we stopped making homosexuality illegal in the 60s. So that's the size of the movement that needs to mobilize and can have some genuine power. So, but I think it's important to note, so I hope I won't ramble on too long, Simpa, but I think it's really, really important to note something here, that if people are suddenly fed up of one particular party because of things that have been going on within that political party, please do not let it taint you to the most suitable candidate in any one particular area. Because, for example, there are some Labour candidates who are genuinely the best candidates in a certain area. There are equally Labour candidates who we need to get rid of. These individual candidates who have so much control over policing priorities do not act on party lines, and this is not a party political issue. This is about individuals. And that's really important to note when we start to discuss certain people who we need to try and get voted in, and some people who we really, really need to get voted out. So that's where I'm coming from, and I look forward to the discussion. So thanks for inviting me, Simpa.
Excellent. Thanks for coming, Neil. Finally, folks, I'll hand you over to Mr. Tim Henley. Would you please introduce yourself, explain why you're here, sir?
Yes, indeed. Thanks very much for inviting me. I'm going to be really interested in how this develops and moves forward. One of the most important things for me is the actual role of the Police and Crime Commissioner. And I'm going to read you the actual specification, or a section of the specification. The role of the PCCs is to be the voice of the people and hold the police to account. They are responsible for the totality of policing. The PCCs aim to cut crime and deliver an effective and efficient police service within their force area. So what does that mean? That means they control directional spending. They can control budgets. They can influence outcomes. So it's an incredibly powerful role. Now, I've been on at this for a good long time, and I actually work in the cannabis industry. So for me, this is a really important area. I work in medical cannabis, which is primarily served by private prescriptions, which effectively means that if cannabis is Schedule 2, it is a medicine. If it is Schedule 1, i.e. Schedule 2 means it's been grown in Canada or Australia under EU GMP conditions, that means it's been grown in concrete and steel, then it is transported to the UK. That's perfectly acceptable as long as you can pay the money, have a prescription, have a medical reason for using it. That is medical cannabis Schedule 2. If for any other reason you have cannabis that is Schedule 1, that is a crime, and it is possibly sentenciable to 16 years. So there's a real kind of dichotomy here. How can we influence that change? You've got Sadiq Khan saying, look, I'm going to look at this if I get re-elected. In London, I'm going to possibly decriminalize. You've got Boris Johnson standing up and saying, not on your life, mate. Well, I'm sorry. I absolutely believe in democracy. Politics in the Police and Crime Commissioner elections, to me, makes no difference. Whether they're Labour, whether they're Conservative, it is the individual candidate that matters. What is their view? So I work for a company called Access Canna. We emailed every individual Police and Crime Commissioner candidate. There are 166. Actually, some things have changed since 2016. There were 40 Police and Crime Commissioners. There are now only going to be 39 because West Yorkshire has changed to be an elected mayor. So this is one of the changes that's happening. There's also a whole load of other really interesting information about the candidate breakdown, where they come from, all kinds of things. So I urge you to go and look for your candidates and actually vote, because they will influence change. Just as Neil has said about Ron Hogg and Arvin Jones in North Wales, there is so much potential. North Wales is a particularly interesting area, actually, because that one's on a knife edge. Some of these are already kind of where the Tories or Labour are kind of the incumbent party. You are not going to challenge them. But votes will matter. And if we can actually show that there are votes in cannabis, you will get change. In the general election, people are not going to vote on cannabis. There are bigger, more important issues. Police and crime commissioners, absolutely. Reform of the police service. Look at what's going on in America. The whole kind of thing. Now, I'm not saying that's the same thing here, but what happened in America was there was local democracy. It's also the same in Switzerland. To give you something of what's going on, in Switzerland, they are now instigating a trial. 5,000 people will be able to access cannabis in Switzerland because of a referendum they had. That will increase to 50,000 by the end of this year. Luxembourg, Belgium, moving along these lines. Local democracy, people actually taking action and not just waving it goodbye. Oh, it makes no difference to me. Police and crime commissioners, what influence do I have? You've got to vote and you can use it. And that vote has power, real power that can change the whole direction and narrative on the legislation in cannabis in the UK. We're talking about de facto decriminalization, but we need to go past that. I work in the cannabis industry. We need jobs after COVID. I mean, what the hell? What's this economy going to look like? Deborah, you are a publican.
Well, I currently have what I have now is a hemp and cannabis shop. I'm a high street retailer. Yeah.
So one of the really interesting things there is you're going to be affected by the legislation that has been called novel foods. It's now regulated foods in the UK. Exactly. How can we influence these outcomes? Because we don't have any levers we can push for this. Police and crime commissioners, absolutely, we can push it and we can move it forward. For me, that changes the whole debate and is really a critical element of what all of this is about. And the more we can activate people to do it, the better it is. Find out which candidate to vote for and vote for them and increase their voter turnout. It doesn't matter. Obviously, we want them to win. In certain cases, I'm in West Mercia. I don't think there's any chance that Neil will advise me of dislodging John Candy. I don't really think there is. But as you know, in West Mercia, we emailed all the candidates. Not one of them has responded, not even the Liberal Democrat. We don't have a Green Party here. Neil, please.
Oh, is it Crowley, the Liberal Democrat? Mm. Yeah, she's responded to me.
Oh, has she? Oh, how useful. Well, you've obviously got more weight than we have. But these are the kind of things.
But just to conclude, so for West Mercia, anyone who lives in West Mercia, Lib Dem is my recommendation.
Absolutely, fully agree.
She's the only person who's responded, and she's very good indeed. And also, in terms of the voting, Lib Dems are the only party that's got a chance of dislodging our horrific current PCC anyway.
Do you know what? I found out today, the libdems.org.uk/cannabis, they have a web page, and that web page is "We need to legalize cannabis." That was the first time I'd ever come across it. It's on the Lib Dem website, and it's an actual page, and it says it. Now, to me, that's who you principally go for, unless you have a more advanced candidate. And we've got messages from all of the different candidates, or the ones that have responded, and there's been a real kind of a spectrum from candidates from the Reform Party who've said it's a scourge on the country, to candidates from Liberal Democrats and Greens who are saying we need to make an industry out of this, and that includes CBD and hemp, moving that forward. Why are we still having to pay £512 to grow hemp? I mean, in this day and age, that's just ridiculous.
They should be paying farmers. They should
Absolutely.
be subsidising the farmers to grow it.
Yeah, if you were to look at then the fossil fuel industry, if you look at some of the things that we subsidise, dairy, meat, etc. in this country, there's a sorry, it was very loud in my ear. It's an incredibly biased system when you look at it. And I think you've all brought up something that is incredibly important here, which is the overall turnout. The turnout is so low when you consider the sheer size of the populations of these regions. As Tim also spoke of there, we're slowly losing some of the PCC roles that are getting absorbed into the mayoral offices. This would be the route that Sadiq Khan would take. Basically, there is a discretionary system that can be put in place if the PCC, because they are the elected individual and the chief constable, who is the highest ranking officer within that region, they can come to, they can have a parley, they can have an agreement, and they can basically, as was sensationally put by the Daily Mail, create a Dutch coffee shop style culture. Obviously, this was what Ron Hogg and Mike Barton did back in Durham. They started this from 2015. This then, like I said, evolved into the checkpoint scheme, which was basically to include all low-level crime. So no serious crime in terms of violence, sexual attacks, anything like that. They were obviously deemed serious offences, were removed from this. What they found was they dropped the repeat offender rate massively. They also found that it was able to engage with information acquisition within the community. And this isn't snitches getting stitches, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the public actually talking to the police and going, you know, what's a problem, this, that, and the other. And it allows the police to get an understanding of how to police that population. And this is the mechanism of the PCC. As Tim beautifully read out the statement there, that lit me up, as you probably saw, because if that is representative and true, that is one hell of a mechanism that we have. We also have the Pact Agreement, Policing Communities Together, which sets down a bunch of bylaws and rules that basically kind of bully the police into having to communicate and conversate with us. And cannabis is one of these major prevalent subjects, because as Neil's pointed out in his books, Neil Woods has pointed out in his books, as you can see, obviously the drug wars graphic flashing behind him from his second book, about county lines and about this arms race analogy, the way that policing has mutated the scene within cannabis communities and within the dealing and the apparatus by which people access cannabis. So this gives us all, for the first time in a long time, because even the previous elections, people weren't anywhere near as informed as they are on cannabis. The CBD industry has morphed and has grown. The idea of exactly what Tim's saying, people are now going, wait, why have I got to pay to grow hemp? People are then going further and going, wait, why is hemp and not cannabis? Why is cannabis not hemp? Why CBD and not THC? Why are we not looking at the synergy of terpenes? Why are we not looking at the science of this and really getting into this? Why are we being drip-fed a certain amount of knowledge? And it was a different conversation for a different way, but this allows a mechanism for us to fight back against that drip-fed of information, to kick open that dam and get the floodgates going and really revive that industry. Because as Tim says, we've done decriminalisation. Arthur Jones came out, who's the North Wales Police Crime Commissioner, quite an ally for drug reform while still in office. He's unfortunately retiring shortly, but he's been a very outspoken candidate for cannabis. And he said, look, we've already got decriminalisation. We don't need people standing in this election on it. But the ones that are, show that they're willing to have a conversation about what comes next. Because de facto decriminalisation, as I said, is the two people getting in a room and going, do you agree? I agree. Sweet, sign this, job done. And then that police force de facto decriminalises. So they would then refuse to criminalise you for possession, small amounts of cultivation, and even in some extenuating some circumstances, they allow dealing to flourish within the North. And again, the impact that had on inquisitive crime, that it had on antisocial behaviour, and that it had on the base opportunities of individuals to feed their families and to keep that little bit of community going. So I would implore anybody that's listening to become active within this. As you've seen, I've flashed up across the screen, guys, the website whocanivotefor.co.uk. You enter your postcode into there, it'll give you the candidates that are available and on the ballots. It won't give you the information about their cannabis preference, but from work that's been done by Leap and Access Canna, you can go onto their sites and through their social media and see the responses of the individual PCC candidates. Obviously, there hasn't been much of a pressurizing into local elections, but one of the reasons I wanted to bring Deborah in this evening was to discuss this next point, which is the idea that can local councils also have an effect on the way that policing is gone? If then the PCC is an elected official, are there other mechanisms within local politics we can use to convince them, or to at least make them uncomfortable until they see the light?
I guess it's a difficult one. The way that I am currently overcoming that, and in general, you know, not in pursuit of a political, you know, election, but through having my shop and having such a varied number of products in there that are all made from hemp. And I actually share the premises with a refill shop, so we have people coming in very regularly, and they're people that wouldn't otherwise normally know about hemp. But for me personally, it's making it a part of the conversation all the time. But, you know, I unfortunately wasn't invited to an environmental hustings recently, and unfortunately I wasn't spoken to by the BBC, as were other candidates from all the major parties. However, any organisations that have written to me, for example, the Buckinghamshire Countryside Charity, I've written to them, and where they've asked what will I do to support farmers, I've quite obviously gone into, about hemp, about growing hemp, and I talk to them as though they don't know anything, because chances are they don't. Just, I've found that we have environmental champions, we have sustainability champions who don't know about hemp. How you can talk, about a green future moving forwards without talking about hemp is beyond me. I don't understand. And yet we have Green Party candidates that do that. I'm not saying you can know about everything, of course, but I believe, hemp is that important to us, and to farming, to industry, to the environment, to so many industries that you can't you can't be ignorant to it in this day and age. And so whilst I question really how much influence as a councillor, but I don't see my councillors yielding that much influence over things like this. But is that because of who they are and what they choose to do with their time? Whereas I'm inspired by towns like Frome, where they have taken over their councils with independent candidates entirely, at a local level, and also the Haswells up, I think, near you, in the north. There is a big movement now of independents that are coming together and being like, no, do you know what? We don't need party politics to come to a decision. We've got democracy for that. When we need to come to a decision, we'll take a vote. We go with the majority, and we need a wide range of people sat at that table, to make sure that that discussion is applicable to a wide range of people. So whilst, to be honest with you, I'm answering a question like a politician, because I don't know. I don't know how much.
You've answered it well, in the sense that, so the mechanism by which you can then potentially push it from looking at it now without being informed of what the position entails is, I suppose, informing the public. The public then put the pressure on the PCC from that mechanism. So it's through education and information.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm being put in touch with, I'm being contacted by organisations, by charities that I wouldn't normally have contact with. My local environmental group volunteers know all about hemp, because we see each other the third Sunday of every month in the river, and I talk to them about it all the time. But it's just reaching, like extending that reach, extending that education, and getting people to question what they know about hemp as a plant, and then making them realise that actually they don't know anything at all.
Okay, well, that's something I look forward to post your election. Then is a town-wide campaign and all the bush shelters and everything with cannabis education. Did you know that we could sequester 325 kilograms per atmospheric ton of the usual spiel? I'd love to see it.
Well, I had the Seed Our Future seeds outside, because I have a plant and seed swap outside the shop as well. And some of the Seed Our Future seeds made their way onto the seed swap last year, and I think in Cheshire we had quite a good turnout for that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I suppose then I'll throw the same question over to Neil and Tim there. Is there then potentially a mechanism, do we think, or do we know of, where the local councillors, the local politicians would have an effect or a channel for potentially pressurising the PCC's post-then election, if then a candidate is elected that then doesn't, or worse, betrays their party promise, their election promise to decrim or to look into this? Is there a mechanism that could be held accountable through the councils?
Do you want me to answer that first, Tim, or do you want to go?
Whichever. I'm happy. I tell you what, because I think it might actually lead on for some interesting stuff from you. So let's go back to Holland, the Netherlands. You mentioned about the kind of coffee shops and things there. Well, the Netherlands, they've lost their first adopter advantage on cannabis to a big extent. They obviously had coffee shops way back then. They developed this term called Hadoken, which is toleration. It meant that it's still illegal, cannabis, in the Netherlands. But they had this term called Hadoken, which is we'll turn a blind eye. It isn't a crime with a victim, so it's not really an issue. We could develop this. So that is the kind of avenue of approach that I personally think is really powerful. And it's something that Neil and I were discussing for Liverpool with the chilling rooms, where we could develop this whole operational system. Now, there's a candidate there, Liberal Democrat, Chris Brown. He is fully in favour. It will probably be a Labour candidate. She hasn't responded to me, Neil. Has the Labour candidate in Merseyside responded to you?
No. Well, the thing is with Merseyside, Jane Kennedy, the incumbent, is not standing again.
No.
And if she was standing again, I would say, God, we have to get rid of this woman because she was appalling. Now, I've heard nothing from anybody to suggest that the regime is changing in terms of that. So I'm getting the impression that it's going to be much of the same, which means that Labour really is not the person to vote for in Merseyside. Now, I've heard that the Green candidate is more likely because Merseyside is so left-wing. Greens do often come second in certain elections. Lib Dems don't necessarily do so well in Merseyside. So what I would suggest to people out there is in a place like Merseyside, where it's a relatively high population, you need to organise amongst yourselves, make a decision and work together. You need to organise, talk to each other. You know, we can give you hints that obviously the Greens or the Lib Dems will be more on your side than the incumbent regime, but you need to decide. You need to make.
I think it's important to note that in 2016, the last time these elections were held, there were 9.2 million votes cast. The other thing to note is in the Police and Crime Commissioner elections, it is a supplementary vote system. So you have a first choice and you have a second choice about who you can vote for. That's a critical element, because if the first vote doesn't achieve a majority, then it goes on to the second vote and they're accumulated. The potential is that we can create change. The statistical voting analysis will take place afterwards, and political parties are not kind of sitting there. But coming back to this thing about toleration zones, which is where you can negotiate with a local body of authority, that be the local council, the local police, the local community, and say, right, what do you actually want? You know cannabis is coming. You're going to go to New York, you're going to go to Vancouver, you're going to go to Toronto, you're going to go to Sydney. You are going to see it everywhere. It is coming to the UK. You are not King Canute. You cannot hold it back. It is going to happen here. How do you want it to happen? Do you want stock market-led Canadian investment companies that are going to go for the maximum potential return on everything? Or do you want bottom-up democracy that develops a whole kind of avenue of opportunity with local kind of input about how it does and operate? Cannabis clubs. Cannabis clubs are the ideal solution for a lot of this. It allows for centralized testing. The one thing, all right, I'm going to grow cannabis. Fine, fair enough. How do you know you haven't got mold? How do you know your THC, CBD, your minor cannabinoids, terpenes? These are really important elements in the cannabis kind of makeup of, it's, for me, medicinal elements. But for everybody, stress relief, that's a primary reason most people use cannabis in my experience. For me, the big issue here is to avoid problem cannabis use. And clubs are the best way to do that, not the big multinational companies, not the international investment vehicles. They are the ones that are forging it. They're the ones that are actually going to Boris Johnson and saying, look, oh, we can do all this. And at some point in the future, there will be a cannabis industry that is enlightened here and that will move forward. Is it top down or is it bottom up? My suggestion is we can create bottom up by actually going out and voting as of the 6th of May and achieve some change.
Yeah.
There are 6 million, maybe 7 million cannabis users. All right, so we went back and we went 9.2 million people voted in 2016. You can reduce that by at least 25% because they're not going to bother to vote because of COVID. Postal votes, some of those have already been issued. So if everybody who was interested in cannabis, and that includes CBD, I mean, 6 million people are into CBD. Well, CBD is going to change because of the novel foods regulation.
It's already changed. I've had 3 businesses contact me, one of which lost 25,000 carts at customs, and they were astonished when I told them that they're basically now selling crack as far as the government's concerned. It's a Schedule 1 drug. They've imported an illegal substance. They've broken many laws. So it's about the level of enforcement. There's something else you brought up that's interesting about the clubs. So this is something I'm being trying quite adamantly to get intimately involved with the Greens, because their policy is very ambiguous. Their national policy is we want to decriminalise and create, now the terminology is social spaces. So they've even moved away from clubs because they're not really defining what a club is, because club models, they're still not working. We have sort of Transform's idea of several different versions of models. We then have what we're seeing in Spain, and we then have several different models here in the UK that are operating to various success. And I think that what you're saying about people that want CBD, if they want hemp, if they want anything at this point, decriminalization of cannabis allows for that. We don't then have to get the nuance of changing certain legislation or whatever. You can then, if you've got decriminalized cannabis in your area by the de facto police force, guess what? You then can go and plant hemp in your back garden if you wanted to, because they then still can't enforce that licensing act, because it's then down to the individual forces to arrest you, to get you in front of the CPS. We then start to create a system of the same people that then become your peers once we go to court, and then they just vote you away. We're starting to see this pop up in America. We're starting to see it with various cases where the judge is going, you have to do this, and the jury goes, no. And you are acquitted based on what your opinion of your jurors, not what the judiciary thinks of you. So even if you are very disenfranchised right now, you're sat at home screaming ACAB, you're sat there going, oh, and you're thinking of all the riots that have gone down, you're thinking of the global events. This is the best way to send a fuck you to that system. All those cops, those hoity-toity fuckers with their uniform walking down the street, smelling that bit of weed, sniffing out 3 16-year-old kids and going, I'm going to ruin their fucking life. Stick it to them. Every one of them. Every image you've ever seen, every bad guy, every in a film that you can think of that's a cop, channel that shit. Go and tick it. You may see the horrible thing of Conservative or Labour or Lib Dem, whatever the asphyxiate party to it. But as we've just discussed, this is about the individual's beliefs, and it's about your belief within them. The party whip system means that you really, truly cannot trust national politicians, because if they say something that is against the narrative of their party, they can't enforce it. Whereas these are so diluted, and it is such a new system, and there are some truly interesting people that are trying to get in these positions of power, that they very may well just kind of turn around to that system and go, you know what, fuck you. You know, if someone like Cleo Lee gets in power into Bristol, do you really think that she's going to let anybody in any chair of power talk down to her and not allow her to exercise that power? So there are these candidates, there are these people around the country, and unfortunately there are some people in various regions that are not going to get this option in the UK, and that is something that, again, is more important why the people who can should, because we set precedent. Remember, it was Ron Hogg and Mike Barton sat in a room, and they created this cascade and this snowball, and that led to all of these new clubs, to all of these new events. We had 2 years where we only had one event rated that I can think of, one major event that was rated, and that was because they went above and beyond with advertising, and there were 2 out there. The rest of it, the cops were aware of, man. My flyer, my business card was stuck to Durham Constabulary's central notice board. For 2 years we ran events and we never saw nobody. They sent one cop one time, they had a body cam on, and I begged them. I went, please, let's have a meeting. Here's my info, here's my phone number, here's my address. Let's sit down, let's talk this out. And it just shows we can have that kind of openness, and we can create that space that even if you want to protect against corporate cannabis, you want to see that cottage industry, it's through de facto decriminalization we build that, because then we can show workable, ethical models for therapeutics, for holistics, for so-called recreational social consumption. We can prove these workable models. We can show that, look, we're generating tax, we're generating revenue. The Yanks have been doing this for 9 years before now the Safe Banking Act has only just passed the House. If that goes through the Senate, it's going to have been a decade they've had to work in cash. Watch how fast and how amazing the things that they can do when that money can go into a system and create liquidity. That's what we can work towards. We can build that through, as Tim was saying, grassroots, through the bottom up. Internet connection's unstable. Glad that's the only one of us that's unstable this evening. So as Tim was saying, this is coming from the top down. The investors, the CEOs of these companies are already here. They're already working with the think tanks, with the regulators. They're the ones that are pushing for the FSA to strangle off the CBD industry. That's the reason you're seeing Pleasant Lands this morning getting pushed now. Voltface's project. I warned you guys about this last August in my call to arms letter. I told you this was coming. they've now created the bottleneck. So then they're going, oh my God, the people that we got through that paid 25 grand a pop, they now need their needs serving. We want to change the licensing and the rules and restrict it further so that they're the ones who have paid to play. Whereas this decriminalisation, that's a huge fuck you to that system, to any of it, because it empowers the people. If we remove the teeth from the guard dog, it doesn't matter if it's running around the yard. We can still operate, wander freely. And so this is why this is such an important election. It really is. So if anybody that isn't already aware, if you just joined in, please check out, if you go into the electoralcommission.org.uk, you can check there if you are already registered to vote, because unfortunately voting is already closed. You can also check out whocanivotefor.co.uk. Simply enter your postcode, it'll bring up the candidates. As I said before, you can check out Access Canada Leap, WTU. There's quite a few organisations, I think Seed Our Future as well, have shared quite a lot of information about the candidates' individual preferences, and that's what's going to get this passed here, is the individuals, not party politics. So that brings me on to my next question, which is, with the creation of new mayoral positions, with the idea of independents really regaining local power, the idea of Welsh and Scottish independence, are we moving towards a system where national politics isn't really as important? Can people really actually, if they want to see change in police, just vote for the police? If they want to see change in their actual community in terms of environmental policies, etc., they can just vote for their local council?
From my experience of, I don't know if you're familiar with the flat pack democracy, with this book by Peter McFadden, and he really espouses this power. And it's particularly the many examples from Frome, particularly at the height of austerity, they were able to borrow £1 million, which they invested in Frome, when everywhere else around them was not able, was told, I've been told there's no money for a anti-litter campaign. I don't, so it just seems, I think we can do it. That's what, I believe in it. I believe in democracy. I think that if more people stood up and, realised that they have as much right to sit at the table and have a voice at the table as everyone else, I think we could really see a change. Definitely.
Neil, Tim?
No, I think that's definitely, you see, for me, I'm old. I'm really old. And my grandkids are going to inherit a world that is so far removed from the one I grew up in. And you've got the whole kind of climate change, societal impact. You've got the whole habitat collapse. Moving this forward, there needs to be a complete reset in the way that we do things. These things are starting to happen. You want 75% reduction in carbon emissions by 2035? What the hell are you going to do about it? When do you start? What, is it next year or the year after, or is it now? So that is the whole element of this. For me, cannabis still has a detrimental word. People are still there's a stigma. Every time I hear a stigma, I work with medical professionals that are now starting to embrace cannabis because of the endocannabinoid system. They understand the endocannabinoid system. They took the brave kind of thing about starting to prescribe cannabis when NICE and the GMC were still going, well, you shouldn't be doing this. In fact, they're still doing that now. But the consultants, and it's at consultant level, so there's a whole number of different issues that have got to change here. That is a start of a change. It is this cascade of change that we're initiating here that leads on to us not having to charge for growing hemp, being paid to grow hemp, because it is an absolute natural resource. It's like you're going to put out your first team to combat climate change and you've taken off your best centre forward and said, right, well, do it now. Well, you can't. It's impossible. 4 times as much carbon sequestered as there is. Yet, Schedule 2 cannabis requires that you'll grow it in a concrete and steel greenhouse, transport it halfway across the world. At the moment, there will be UK growth facilities here. It's all coming. It absolutely is. It's how the regulation will be done. How does the individual have the influence to make something change? And that, for me, is all going to be about voting. Boris Johnson and his kind of sleaze factor, that's growing. We know where it comes from. We know about Victoria Atkins. We know all of that stuff. It is now the kind of, how can we influence that change that's actually going to generate cannabis from being a negative to a positive? So one of the things which I think is really important to kind of emphasize, and this won't go down very well with Simpa, one of the big things is that most people object to the smell of cannabis who are not in the cannabis community. Me, I vaporize. I'm a medical cannabis user, so I vaporize. It's the only way I do it. I used to smoke for 30 years and tobacco, and that's done immense damage to me. I'm hoping vaporizing cannabis actually helps my lungs. But these things, we have to tackle this. There will be problem use from cannabis. What is the best way? Is it to keep it prohibited, or is it to create a regulated system that allows for funding of services or community projects that create spheres of influence that highlight these things and work around it? I mean, to me, there is a real game change here, and cannabis is a principal element in that game change. We haven't even spoken about psilocybin and the kind of advents of that moving forward. But these are all kind of natural remedies that we're going back to. We are going back to the future, and we have to. And I think that what Neil's done with the drug wars just highlights the complete hypocrisy of the police and the way it's done. But the police are only doing a job. They're told to do this by an organizational system. Neil's challenging that and saying, look, you take out these players, they're just replaced by other players because it's a big industry. It doesn't matter whether it's a corporate sector from Canada or the drug dealers from wherever. And I think that for me, the only way to combat that is to create a system that actually empowers individuals to take part in that economy and move it forward.
Yeah, I'm a single issue activist, so I only look at almost everything through a drug policy lens. And just referring back to your last question, Simpa, about whether, apart from the PCC elections, whether other local government elections have an impact. Well, I'll give you two examples of where local government, so your local councillors, have had an impact on drug policy, either positively or negatively. We talk in hallowed terms about the late Ron Hogg and Mike Barton. They did wonderful things, not just for cannabis, but they tried to reform drug laws in a wider sense, which appeals to me massively, in that they tried to bring in heroin-assisted treatment in Durham, and they were blocked in bringing in heroin-assisted treatment in Durham by local councillors. Those local councillors prevented that innovation. On the other side, where David Jameson in Birmingham wanted to bring in an experiment of doing city centre drug testing for the nighttime economy, he had the backing of local councillors. So it matters who you vote for. And you should make sure that anyone you ever vote for, if you have campaigners on your doorstep, you make it clear to them that unless they believe in an evidence-based drug policy, they're not getting your vote. And, that's a very simple basis to begin the whole conversation politically. Mm-hmm. We can change things, and every single councillor, every single politician matters, every single one. So yeah, it matters, and we have to get, and look, drug policy reform is happening through local government. It's not happening through central government. The more reform that happens locally, whether it's drug testing in Birmingham, heroin-assisted treatments in Cleveland, whatever it is, that puts pressure on, its momentum to influence central government. Because what you're doing with any local innovation, you're making the social movement grow. And this is a social justice issue. We're not going to win this by political leadership. Mm-hmm. We'll win it by growing the social movement. And every single one of you out there, that's your responsibility as much as it is ours here on this panel. If you believe in drug policy reform, do something about it. If only that's voting on May the 6th. But in addition to voting, you need to convince everyone else you know to vote. And you need to talk to them and decide who you are all going to vote for. Now, would you mind, Simpa, if I just dropped out a few names of very, very important people that need to vote for? Right, so obviously in some areas, Lib Dems are best. Quite often Greens are. So what county are you in, Deborah?
Buckinghamshire.
Buckinghamshire, right.
The Tory trump card.
Yeah. So I do not support any particular party.
No,
I don't.
Political.
But
yeah.
It just so happens that with the PCC elections, I'm struggling to find a Tory who's in favour, who's in tune with our views here. That's not to say that's necessarily the same with each councillor or MP, but certainly for PCC. So the important names, the big names, Ben Toomey for Warwickshire. If you know anyone who knows anyone who lives in Warwickshire, you need to vote for Ben Toomey. Ben Toomey wrote the policy for Ron Hogg. He wrote the policy for David Jameson. He's now standing for Labour in Warwickshire, and he is a very, very important politician for the future of our movement. Very important. I would suggest that continuity in County Durham is important to stay with Labour there. The gain with Cleveland is Labour. Barry Coppinger, who brought in their heroin-assisted treatment, unfortunately is not standing again, but I have it on good authority that the Labour candidate which is coming in will continue with their policies. And the heroin-assisted treatment policy in Cleveland, it's not just about cannabis. It's saving lives and reducing crime. It's important, an important showcase of policy. In North Wales, we've mentioned the wonderful Arfon Jones, member of Leap UK. Okay, he's not standing again, but I can assure you all that he has had massive influence within Plaid Cymru, massive influence. He's influenced all of his other candidates. He's got them all on message. They all understand. So for Wales, if I lived in Wales anywhere, I would be voting Plaid Cymru. I've met David Llewellyn from West Wales. He's brilliant. He's definitely on board. And I am assured that the other two candidates for Wales are as well. Birmingham, I would say again, continuity. David Jameson might not be standing again, but the policies will continue to be progressive for Labour there.
That's Simon Foster.
Yes.
West Midlands,
right.
Simon Foster. So
That's the one.
Griffith in North Wales. We may as well give them names because I think it's important because that's what you're going to look for. It's Anne Griffith. She's really good. And that's a tight run election. That some of these are kind of not really that competitive. But North Wales is. So anybody in North Wales, you need to vote for Anne Griffith, the Cymru candidate. Some of them, I think there's so much. We've got all of the names of all the people that we think you should vote for because of that. All due respect to Neil, I'm only interested in cannabis, to be honest. I understand completely drug reform, absolutely. But for me, it's cannabis is the first kind of element in that kind of change in perception of things. And I think that there is very much a list of candidates that we should vote for. That really.
Well, can I ask you something then, Tim? Because I don't want to, at the risk of appearing rather negative, in South Yorkshire, you people have to get rid of Billings, the current Labour PCC. It's an appalling regime in South Yorkshire. They have regular use of sniffer dogs in the city centre of Sheffield. This should not be going on in 2021. So, people in Sheffield, you need to decide who you're all going to vote for and vote for them, but not the current candidate. I suspect, from what some people have told me, that the Green candidate has the best chance of beating him. But organise, please. Just a few hundred of you could make the difference there. And you've got to get rid of this guy.
Yeah, all good points, all good names. As you said, some elections are obviously a lot closer than others. Could, between you two gentlemen, over the next sort of few days, would you be able to provide me a resource I could throw on the simpalife.com so that people can click on and it'll show them the candidates?
Yeah, we're working with Guy Coxwell, Seed the Future as well. So Seed Our Future.
Seed Our Future.
Yeah, sorry. We'll get a list, which we're going to do at the weekend. We're trying to get all the candidates to have responded. But I think that the ones that have, they're fully endorsed. Otherwise, it's either Green and Liberal Democrat, and it's your choice as to which you vote for, based on their policies.
Apart from the ones we've just discussed, because
absolutely.
You don't disagree with me on those, do you, Tim?
No, not at all. I've got a whole list of them. I haven't got anybody from South Yorkshire though, so I'd suggest a Liberal Democrat is the obvious solution. But again, people vote on tribal party lines, and it's one of those things. But this isn't tribal politics, the police and crime commissioners. They're individuals. The party affiliations don't really make that much difference, because there are quite a few independents that have Gloucestershire. Martin Sol, is it? He's an independent candidate and very proactive in the way they've approached things. So I think that you've just got to find out where your area is, find out the candidate you vote for, and all kind of vote for the same candidate. If there isn't a named candidate, then choose the party that you're most in line with. But this is the age of social media, and we all need to communicate with each other and kind of say, right, well, I'm going to vote for this one. Let's all do that on the day of the election. So on Thursday morning, everybody says, this is it, and you go for that candidate. I think significant voting changes in patterns will be very influential in the outcome moving forward. A policy for all parties. You've got Keir Starmer saying, well, I'm quite happy with the way it is, to be honest. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? Change needs to come, and your candidates need to tell you change needs to come. And that means people like us, and it doesn't matter whether it's local politics with Deborah or your grandmother or grandfather, just talk to them about cannabis and drugs and kind of the change that needs to happen, because it's a scourge on society the way that it's done now. It's madness, absolute madness. And I think police dogs in the middle of Sheffield is not the way that we need to be. That sounds more like China to me, and that's not the society I want to live in at all.
Yeah, Sheffield are an interesting one for anyone that frequents the motorway. You will notice of all of the smart motorways in the north, it is literally South Yorkshire Police are the only ones who regularly turn the cameras on and leave them there. They're a scourge to a lot of communities in a lot of ways. They are really policing for financial incentive over what the public actually wants. And as Neil has proven with his work with J.S. Raffaelli in his previous books, the harder you oppress people that consume drugs and deal drugs, the more you invite a criminal element, the more you create sensationalism, you create more incentive, you create, whether that's financial, whether it's the expansion of markets, whatever else. So we're seeing that where they take that boot off, you can then assess the situation and approach it properly. A lot of these candidates, they will not be half as informed as you fine folk out there. Don't think that they will. A lot of them have come from politics, a lot of them have come from policing and have come from public service. So they'll know what they've been allowed to know. Remember the Upton Sinclair quote about a man's salary dependent on him knowing, how's a man supposed to know something if his salary is dependent on him not knowing it? So they have the desire, they have the inclination, and they have that want, but it's so important for us to first get them in that position and then continually bombard them with our demands. And what we want is simple. We want an end to the war on drugs. It first comes with a de facto decriminalisation so that we are not being thrown in cages for the contents of our pockets. Then from there we build it. So as we've alluded to over this live, do not be turned off by the term Labour, Lib Dem, or Conservative. I choked even just thinking about it there. So do not be put off by these terminology. Sorry, I'm joking, obviously. But am I? The terminology, vote on the individuals, look into their policies, look into the information that we are going to publish over the coming days. I will put links to all of the information that will be published by the various organisations we have mentioned. And just seriously, have that conversation with your family, with your friends, anyone you know who's registered to vote. This isn't the same as you going, oh, well, if I vote this, I'm back in the national. No, you're not. You're really not. This is almost a single issue. The rest of policing is going to be dealt with. They're not going to legalise rape. They're not all of a sudden going to back off assaults. They're not going to change any of the other institutional policing. They're just going to stop targeting the most vulnerable in our society. We're going to stop demonising the people who most need that hand up rather than that boot down. So please, with compassion, look into your local candidates, look into the issues, and vote with your heart. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. Obviously, these fine guys will give you an idea of who's going to present these policies. But even if you choose to take in that information and vote against it, I harbour you no ill will. I really don't. This is an opportunity for us to re-enfranchise ourselves in a system, to take back the control of politics, to understand how our individual role in ticking that little box can have a profound and direct impact in our local communities. So with that note, could you all please give me one final minute of your final thoughts, please? Do you want to go first, Debs?
Sure, yeah, there's a couple of things that just crossed my mind in the last couple of rounds. The first was about Boris's current, stance on it, which is no way or whatever, but it just makes me think back to that video that was shared recently of him saying, well, I've got a couple of neighbours, a couple of bourgeoisie types, and, well, they just sit together and they smoke a spliff, and, what, they're criminals because of that? Well, it's absolute madness. Like, how you can go from that to now, it's just a joke. It's where's the integrity? Where's the honesty? And we're supposed to look up to this person as some kind of, a representative of us. He is our representative, our prime representative. And secondly, it was about councillors that we had good examples there. I probably shouldn't end on a bad one, but it was just thinking about as a councillor what kind of influence you can have. And there's one particular councillor down in Brighton who's running on the fact that he is against Green Pride. And I noticed that story in the news. So that's, an example there where, getting your councillors on side, having councillors that are members of your community, people that you can speak to about anything. That's why it's important to have people like me and like that on your councils.
Perfect.
Tim?
No, you go first, mate.
Well, I'd just reiterate exactly what we've said before, is that it doesn't matter if it's just people in your local community. If you've got family who live elsewhere in the country, discuss it with them. Start talking about who you're going to vote for, especially if you know anyone in Warwickshire. make sure they're voting for Ben Toomey, especially if you know someone who lives in Anglesey. Make sure they're voting for Anne Griffith and all of the other names we've mentioned. We're all connected. We all know people in different parts of the UK. We can all have these discussions with each other. We can inspire each other to get out and vote, because voting is going to be down. Let's be the people who book that trend. Let's get some influence out there.
Excellent.
So, there are so many responses that we've had. Probably one that sticks to mind is the guy in Sussex Independent, Roy Williams, who was a police officer in Brixton, and his reply was that cannabis was an absolute must for the mind and the body. And you've got candidates like this who are saying things like this. And for me, the deal is, it comes back to this Schedule 1, Schedule 2 thing. How is that possibly sustainable when you're saying it is a medicine for the rich and a crime for the poor? That outside of that, you can have any other kind of way that you want to look at cannabis. As far as I'm concerned, stress reduction, ideal, no problem at all. It is, you need to vote for change, and a change candidate is primarily going to be somebody who's very interested in these policies and moving them forward. So that's what I'd say.
Perfect. Well, thank you all for joining me. To the fine audience back at home, I'll be kicking around for a little bit and we'll have a little bit more of a chat. But you fine individuals, go enjoy your evening, and thank you very much for giving me the past hour of your time. As I've said, guys, we'll be putting up all of the resources and making them all available. Sorry, I was just on wait for these guys to click off. Bye. Thank you. We'll talk later. Sorry, I don't think I made that too clear to them. We didn't really discuss the plan or strategy. I just went, at some point, I might continue, or we might just end. I'll see how I'm feeling. But we're an hour in, I'm still feeling fine. There's a few of you folks kicking around on the various platforms. As always, shout out to my one person who is on Twitch. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. I'm going to go back through some of these comments. I realized about 4 seconds into us recording this, they can't see the comments. I did say respond to comments as they come in, but it's only on my screen and your screen as I put the output of this. I also realized, as you probably saw me moving around quite a lot there, that I changed the font and I've cut people's names off, and it's making it funny for when I'm trying to move stuff around, and I've just moved everything the wrong way. Anyway, as we said, I'll make resources available via thesimpalife.com. I'll share it over all social media of the candidates, especially the ones in tight elections. I nearly said that entirely wrong there. In some regions. And as Tim said, Seed Our Future are also helping out with this. I've seen a lot of stuff come out of WTU as well. So most of the main sort of resources that you guys would use would give you... I can't put it on the screen though because it's in the comments. Guy Coxell, if you guys have seen, maybe I can't scroll back to the comments unfortunately, has put up the access. It's Access Canna, which is spelled KANEH.com/social justice and lots of gibberish. I can't read that. I can't tell them that. Go check out it anyway. Go search Access Canna social justice. That'll get you there. I'll get you there. South Yorkshire, as we heard there, was basically anybody but. Yeah, it's interesting. As we discussed there's a few points that I'm trying to roll off in my head. Like I was kind of making a mental list as I was going through that. Tim brought up an interesting point that we've discussed about Schedule 1 and Schedule 2. Cannabis is actually Schedule 1, Schedule 2, and then there are derived cannabis products that are Schedule 4. So Sativex is Schedule 4 or 5? Schedule 4 currently. And then medical cannabis under the 2001 Misuse of Drugs Act is Schedule 2. Then with Schedule 1 cannabis, Schedule 1 cannabis under 1971. So me smoking this, even if I had got this, as Tim said, grown on concrete under steel and glass in a fucking facility somewhere, got it imported, had a little magic piece of paper, by the act of me smoking it rather than vaporizing it or consuming it in a different way, I magically turn this into Schedule 1 cannabis and I remain a criminal. It's an absurd fucking arbitrary distinction, the way that they've tried to break this and bottleneck all of these individual industries. It's an absurd system, but this is exactly what the PCC elections, predominantly especially, I mean local elections too, but the direct response to this is if you get the PCCs in that have these policies, then the continuation or the creation of these is going to be amazing for various regions. I don't need the headphones on. You're correct, I don't need the headphones anymore. They're kind of comfortable. It feels like a hug for my ears. Oh. Thank you for reminding me to take my headphones off. Oh, if you haven't already as well, please do like, share, subscribe, and do whatever you do on various platforms. It's hard to tell nowadays since this goes out to various streams online. Interesting, Adam. Yeah, it's the... I think the problem that Arfon was having is that you've got the PCC on board, but you didn't have the Chief Constable on board. Whereas I think in the other regions, it was the combination of the PCC and the CC, the Chief Constable, that allowed that that discretionary system to operate. Because ultimately, the CC, the Chief Constable, can still block a lot of what's going on. Also, as we discussed there, the mechanism where if the council are then trying to really make it difficult for the PCC to enact certain policies or to police things in a certain way, and then it's down to individual officer discretion, because then if the officers rebel against the PCC orders that are then put down, it's up to then effectively the Chief Constable to rectify the situation. So they end up at odds at each other, which can then almost not nullify but really make difficult the position of a progressive PCC if they're in a force or within an area where the council are then in opposition to them. Hence the reason it's important to have this diversity then of individuals. And I think that the next elections that we see hopefully have a lot more independent candidates. We'll have a lot more individuals standing either in collections of independents, which sounds like an odd thing, but I mean like non-created national parties, but stand under a common ethos or a common ideology and philosophy. I think that they're going to emerge more out of this. And as we discussed in in sort of the live when we had the panel in there, is that far more people are so much more informed than they've ever been with this. You look at where we were compared to 2016, most people still like CB what? And now everybody in their gran has heard about CBD. It's, you know, it's in Holland and Barrett. You got cannabis leaves on most fucking cosmetics, on shampoos and all sorts. So you're really seeing the predominance of the leaf. It's everywhere. It's spreading. It's constantly spreading, and each time somebody sees that, it lessens it. So they see it on the body shop's window, they then are less of the druggie in a hoodie. You know what I mean? It gives them a comparison. When people start talking about hemp and talking about CBD and start talking about helping epileptic children and all this other stuff, it builds something counter to the monolith of the prohibition, the propaganda of prohibition that has been perpetuated and built up in their head from decades of drip feeding from the media. You know what I mean? Quite a few good comments. I'm glad everyone enjoyed the chat. Big up 420 Keith on Twitch. how are you doing? Oh, we've got 3 whole people. We got 3 whole people on Twitch. This is the largest audience I have had on your platform thus far. Thank you for welcoming me into your home this evening. Good podcast. I'm cynical as fuck. I don't blame you. I'm cynical as fuck about everything. But then at the same time, I'm quite over-informed. But it's one of those things that it's better to have that attempt. I mean, we have direct evidence that this can work. So Ron Hogg was first elected in 2012, in November 2012. He was then re-elected in November 2016 with a much higher mandate because he'd actually been able to enforce what he wanted to do in terms of the checkpoint scheme, the de facto decriminalization, the deprioritization of cannabis, which is a slightly different, more nuanced policy. That was basically him and Mike Barton went at the officers and went, if you fucking bring us someone in possession of a drug, then we're going to reprimand you. You'll get in trouble. So it created this kind of system where the cops were like, I'm not going to prioritize a cannabis arrest, to the point of they would then see our kind of events going off that we ran in Durham and kind of go, oh, okay, that's a thing. You know, it wasn't until the attempts of it making it into the 3rd year before they came and made the situation incredibly difficult. And even then they did it in such a way that it put the pressure on me to shut the event rather than them raiding it, because they knew they didn't have the resources to do so, but they had the resources to potentially drive test people on the way out. They had the potential to search vehicles and really cause some serious trouble for a lot of the people that had gathered there. So it was just a smarter decision to do so. But even since then, they're doing stumble raids. So they're coming across growers. The bigger targeted raids that they're doing in Durham, they're still trying to hit organized crime, but they can't find the line between 20 plants, 100 plants, 1,000 plants. Which one of they're seeing is organized crime? Anybody that comes together as a collective, as a group of people that want to grow together, they're organized by definition. It doesn't make them a fucking cartel. It doesn't make them a bunch of triads or whatever. It doesn't make them this sophisticated level of villainy that they're portrayed as. But because of, I don't know what are the pervading factors, but ultimately the loss of Ron Hogg, the loss of Mike Barton, has led Durham to slide back again. So hopefully now getting an actual new PCC candidate in place rather than having somebody who was in an interim, we might be able to get a bit more progression back to where it was. I mean, fingers crossed. But the same can happen in any region. It's possible. It's entirely possible that what Durham had for that small period of a few years can be made possible and actual in any community in the UK. It's just about getting those officials that agree. And like I said, you may end up with the situation in North Wales where your PCC vehemently and adamantly wants one policy, but for various reasons is unable to actualize it. Still, nevertheless, he's been an incredible champion for reform within authoritative institutions. Do you know what I mean? They're really starting to gain traction now, so that people in offices are actually having these conversations. A few years ago, they simply weren't. Cannabis is a bad drug. It causes psychosis and it's addictive, and we need to get it off the streets. That was the party line, the soundbite for anybody within policing or the judiciary. Whereas now the cracks are starting to show, and people are really starting to see that we have points of entry that we can get in there. And if we get our people, if we get people that are sympathetic to the cause, that are willing to listen, that are willing to adapt and enact policies that will actually benefit the public that they serve, once they start to see that feedback and they can again seek re-election on a higher mandate, that's all they want. They want that continuation of power. They want to be able to enact those policies, and that happens with that direct feedback from the public. You know what I mean? And it's the only way we're going to get a reduction in the way that they're policing shit. Do you know what I mean? Most forces, even there's a few forces that are still going after the individual, but the vast majority of them, they're bored dealing with individual possession. They're bored catching kids smoking in a park. They're bored just stumbling across people in small grows. They don't want to be dealing with this anymore. And if we can then enact police politicians, as it were, for lack of a bit compounding, they can actually do this for us. Whereas we can't rally a chief constable to back us. It doesn't work. We don't have the power. It's not within our remit. They don't have to listen to the public. They are controlled within the Federation and the rest of the larger police apparatus, and they're subservient to national politics. Whereas this is that one mechanism we can get the fuck in there and get this conversation going. some reason, no matter how much water I'm drinking, I've still got the worst cotton mouth in the world. It might have something to do with this rainbow glue that I'm smoking. It's making me a little bit nice and sleepy and toasty. Have you got any questions, guys? We were supposed to do Q&A on the live, and I just simply didn't. But I'm going to kick around for the next 15 minutes and do an hour, so do an hour and a half. So if you got any questions, hit me up, folks, because I'm kind of bored talking about policing. And it's supposed to be a PCC and local election special. Actually, suppose then I'll talk about the councils. So the councils are in a very unique position, I guess, that as Deb was saying, that basically anybody can stand as long as you fulfill the minimum entry criteria. You can get on the ballot. Once you're on the ballot, you then have a right to access your public. You have a right to put out your manifesto, to put out your platform and your pledges. And I think that is something that a lot of people should be considering as a way to get to gain access to that public, because it's all well and good as talking about cannabis in our own little echo chambers and as all knowing the potential environmental, technological and social benefits of it, as well as the therapeutic benefits. But there are people out there just devil's lettuce, demon weed, you know what I mean? They go, yes, one puff and you're fucked, your mind goes and you'll never be the same again. There's still a lot of people out there that carry that level of stigma around this. Or worse, they have this idea that there's medical cannabis over here and the safe stuff that science has made safe. And then there's the stuff that the scary kids in the hoodies in the park are smoking, and it's making them loopy and stab each other. There's just this huge disconnect. And the conversations that we can have with each other, with our family, with our friends, with our community, and then those people are the ones that we elect. Fuck yeah. Rather than having sort of party politicians, rather than having people that are career politicians that are only interested in joining a party, getting affiliation, working up through the ranks and trying to chase some career ladder. You know what I mean? You want people who actually give a fuck about where you live, to stand where you live, to represent the ideals of the people that live there. And that works by getting the councillors on side. So we've missed an opportunity to put our own candidates in most areas, because obviously the election's next week. But there's still an opportunity to look at the policies, look at the ideals of the individuals who are standing in your area. This is not like the national elections. It's not like if you don't vote for the main three, it's a wasted vote. If you organise, if you get your family, your friends, your people in your local community to back a candidate, be it for the PCC elections, for the local elections, you will have an opportunity to really affect change, to have a voice, a representation in your local community. We're never going to get, not for a long fucking time, are we going to get a representation at the national level as just a cannabis community, as in the loose association of people who smoke weed. We're not going to get that voting block. We're not going to get that voice for a long time yet. But what we can do is create these individual pockets. And from that, it reverberates out and eventually becomes, orchestral, and it just builds. Well, no, that's the thing, Creative Storm, saying, do you really think getting the police on board before the politicians and lawmakers is a good idea? Well, yeah, because the politicians and lawmakers are already on board. They're just not on board with us. Look at medical cannabis. Look at what they're about to do with pleasant lands and with industrial hemp, and the need to create a robust domestic CBD industry by creating a new legislation that puts 1% THC cap and creates an open access system for licensing. But then they strangle off the market so they still get to control that licensing backhandedly. They're already putting mechanisms in place for them to create the system that when they press go on legalization, they own everything. They are the regulators. They are the licensors. They are the testers. They are the retail distributors. They are the logistics. They're everything. That's what they're building, and that's what they're doing. And they've been doing it for a long time in this country. They've been doing it for a long time in a lot of countries. They're backing down from things like fossil fuels, from arms trade, from all of these other things that they've invested in for decades. And where the hell's all this money going? Where do you think big tobacco? Where do you think alcohol? Where do you think fossil fuel? Where do you think all of these industries are putting their goddamn money? It's cannabis. The global industry is being built. What they're first seeking to do is ensure that they have a global distribution network. And first they have to get the hubs. And you can watch it with each of these pockets as Australia goes, as Israel goes, as Canada goes, Mexico goes. You know what I mean? You watch the pockets in Europe. I mean, the European Union is not as far as people think off. So, yes, very much so. I think this is a mechanism by which in England and in Wales, we can affect direct change. We can get that opportunity to have our voices heard. Do you know what I mean? And the more we can do that, the more we can represent to them that we aren't druggies and hoodies, that we aren't, you know, thieves, we aren't bad people, we aren't dangerous, we're not going to burgle you or steal your car or whatever other preconceptions that they place upon us. We are everybody. We are a spectrum of a community. We are the grands that are using CBD to help with the joints. You know, we are the cancer patients that are kept alive by illegal FECO. We are the communities of clubs and vendors that are growing and creating an industry, an economy all onto themselves, that are frankly propping up most of the local communities and economies funded by drug dealing. We need to protect those dealers. We need to recognize that their merit and their contribution to society. And the way we do that is to stop destroying them, is to stop stigmatizing them, is to stop marginalizing them, disenfranchising them. It's what they want. If you think, oh, you smoke cannabis, therefore I'm not going to engage in that politics shit, it's pointless. And on the national level, in a lot of ways, it kind of is most of the time. But this mechanism particularly, I mean, the local elections, it's going to be hard to find candidates like Deborah in every region. It just is. But with the PCC candidates, there are several of them in predominantly large areas, especially some that have incredibly draconian policies in terms of the way that they're enacting and policing the war on drugs. They could affect real change in that. And it just becomes a cascading effect that as one goes. You saw within, I think it was 3 years, so it was by 2017, there was 5 police forces had a similar system of deprioritization. And then when the ones, I think 4 went with a checkpoint scheme, and as the checkpoint scheme kicked in, it basically made it de facto decriminalization. So that all came off the election of one man in one region. So the same could be true. If you get someone like Ben Toomey in position, he is going to champion this. He is going to fight for this, and he has more progressive policies than just cannabis. So he's a very interesting candidate to watch out for. In terms of, like I said, the corporate entity, they're here. Look at the GW scam. I mean, look at what the fuck was announced this morning. In the Queen, an institution, the monarchy, that I fucking loathe and despise. Anyway, but that's a different podcast for a different day. They are going to honour GW in this year's Royal Honours, whatever the fuck they call it. And it's a farce. It's an absolute farce, because if you look at the history of GW, when their creation off the back of a royal commission, which was paid for by the UK government to look into the therapeutic potential of cannabis, and instead of giving that to the people and doing what they said the recommendations, which was decriminalise and investigate and research the potential therapeutic value of this, they created a private corporation. They took money from the UK government. They were given the one and only license, issued over how long was it? License was issued, 98? Yeah, for 22 years they held that license. They were the only license in the UK before Northern Leaf were they able to get the second license. So they were given this monopoly, they were given this cartel, they were given this chance to build all of this fucking advantage, while then how many people have gone to prison in the time since 1998? How many people's lives have been ruined by prohibition? How many people whose job opportunities, prospects have been destroyed? How many families torn apart? It's fucking ridiculous. They've already been building this. They're on this shit. So, yeah, we can't sway the politicians because we're 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th in line. The other industries have got there and gone, actually, we've understood that, it can be an energy solution. Oh, wait, we can use it as a fuel. Oh, wait, we can build homes out of it. Oh, wait, we can get rid of plastics. Oh, you mean we can end the opioid trade? When you look at the other fringe of it, they're using the argument of a drug, of me going, I want to get high and weigh, is the reason they're denying us everything else. But that's also the mechanism by which they're going to own all of this shit, and we'll have nothing. We'll literally be left with the option to go to Starbucks and McDonald's of cannabis and buy whatever the hell cultivars that they have genetically engineered and told us that we're allowed to cultivate. It's fucked up, man. We're still fighting for the right to grow a couple of plants in our back garden, and they're already working on synthetic and biosyntheses for creations of cannabinoids. They're already working on plasma cultivation and using DNA structure to then grow them in petri dishes and shit. They're trying to eradicate seeds. They're trying to eradicate our potential and our option to ever get anywhere near this goddamn plant. They want to weaponize every single potential benefit of it and then sell it back to us, because that is the intention of neoliberalistic capitalist politics. So fuck them and their system. If these PCCs are worth any fucking merit, if they are actually there to be able to potentially do any good, I think this is the one shot we swing at. I'm not going to say it's going to work. I'm not going to say how confident I am in the system. Well, I'm actually pretty fucking confident, because I live in Durham and I've seen what Ron Hogg did. I've spoke with our former chief constable. I've been in meetings. I've been in rooms. I've seen what they were trying to do, and I've lived the experience of it by being able to organise, I think, 9 events in total taking over hotels, taking over public parks, taking over regions of space, and having hundreds of people come, having people sell from vendors from all over the country, having speakers from around the world. That can happen by this mechanism. So I'm just reading back through these comments I missed. Can I turn my volume up? Yeah, it shouldn't be down. It's probably because I'm swinging further back than leaning so far forward as I normally do. Sorry about that. That's a hell of a goddamn question. I'm going to park that one for a second there, Simon. I think it is something that's been highlighted, Dubs. If you look at pact, police and community together, there's a mechanism in that which is supposed to have these pact meetings where police meet with communities, and we can then use that to give discretionary feedback. The issue is self-incrimination, the problem they had with the 37 marijuana tax in America that Timothy Leary eventually managed to get the Supreme Court to overturn, which is you have to incriminate yourself to then get help and protection from that criminalization, because it doesn't even come with your fancy prescription. People will still be criminalized by that. There are still mechanisms by which you can be criminalized. If it's the wrong cannabis, if you have too much of it, if it's in the wrong place, if you're smoking it, if you give it to somebody. So if you then are vaping cannabis and it's legal with your prescription, you pass it to someone, you've committed a crime, because then in doing that, you've turned your Schedule 2 medical cannabis into Schedule 1 cannabis, and you have then, given to another person, and that's an offence. And so there's so many of these other ways by which people continue to be criminalized. So it's difficult because half the police don't want to know, and the other half, I don't know, they just don't care. They just don't care. You know, there are a few that do, but I'm not. Well, yeah, I don't want to sit here and scream ACAB, but I mean, anybody by the nature of wanting to be a police officer, they're kind of naive as to what it is, because the idea of it, yeah, if you've been romanticized through movies and film, through movies and TV and whatever else, I can see you want to play the good guy, I can see you want to do that, but because of how corrupted politics have become and how corrupted that has made every other authoritative institution within this country, modern policing is a protection racket for corporations. That's all it is. They say to protect the assets and the interest of the elite, and to police us into consent, quiet, conformist, consumerist consent. Yeah, but I think there is a restrictive system around cultivating your own tobacco. You do need some form of regulation. I think Phil Monk looked into this. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. Even that is not to protect you as a consumer, it's to protect their tax. And that's what they're trying to do with cannabis here. They're not going to release an adult use consumer system or a so-called recreational market here in the UK until they've figured out a tax mechanism that pays them enough that they get their cut. Once they've got their bit, then they'll be happy to share. But until they get it, they ain't gonna fucking share. You're gonna think they've had the whole pie, and we're asking them to share now. They're gonna chip off crumbs. Look at the scale of GW's farm. What was it? It was estimated by, I can't remember which body it was. One of the global drug organizations within the UN, and I can't. There's like 3 or 4 of them. I can't remember which one it was. They estimated that it was over 300 tons in 2019 that was exported of medical legal cannabis from the UK, and yet we've got Tim here sat talking about we're having to import from Israel, Australia, from Canada. Do you know what I mean? The carbon footprint on that, it's missing the point of a lot of what cannabis can give to us. Yes, the individual therapeutic benefit, but it builds homes. You know, it can power the future. We're really looking at this wrong. I mean, it's cannabis t-shirt. You know, I mean, it's cannabis wristband. I'm just gonna check. I'm not wearing cannabis boxes today, but usually I'm. Cannabis socks. You make everything out of it. It is everything. It is such a multi-versatile, useful tool that for us to then criminalize it based on the fact that you can smoke the fucking thing is redonkulous. It's absolutely redonkulous. Is that the crack? Yeah, it's sale a bit. It's the same with anything, though. That's kind of what it should be to a certain extent, though, is that individuals should be free to kind of cultivate and consume whatever they want within their own home, as long as they're not committing a crime or doing harm unto others. Then when they choose to then sell that, that's the issue, because you are profiting from a product, then the nature of that makes it commercial, so therefore it should be regulated. Because if the product has a propensity or a potential to be harmful, then it has to be regulated. This is what they do with alcohol. You can brew all the beer you want and then get your mates around and get smashed up on it and you're fine. You sell it to them, that's an issue. So I've seen a couple of questions coming there. I'll try and answer a couple and then bounce out. Yeah, in terms of Durham Club, we were working with a local cafe and business, and they were giving us the premises for Tuesdays. We were running to take over there once a week, and we were looking to expand from there, and then COVID happened and everything just died. That's probably a poor phrase and a poor turn of phrase, but I mean, just everything ground to a halt. The business themselves are not sure if they're going to be able to continue, so this has then made it incredibly difficult for us. And we just haven't been able to be active as an organization or as a community for quite a while now. We're obviously putting together an event for July 18th, test the waters in terms of COVID regulations and mass gatherings, and it's been a combination of the optics and the COVID regulations that have stopped us doing any of our usual shenanigans and putting on events and awareness evenings, lives, all the usual stuff that we sort of do from the Durham Club. But it's been incredibly difficult with everything that's been going down. So in its absence, obviously, I've been working on the Simpa Life and building the podcast and the website and whatnot. But yeah, we're excited as a team to get back to things as soon as possible. But until we know what the hell's going to happen, because we don't want to arrange an event, get 700 people together and get raided, not for cannabis, not for anything that we're doing, but because we've organized an illegal gathering or whatever else, because that's the kind of nuance of legislation they'll get us with. I'm not comparing us to, but when you think about it, they got Al Capone on tax evasion, not on anything else. No, that is as true as I can find. It seems to be evidenced and backed by several people that I've spoke to that have been within the industry for quite a long period of time. Somebody wrote a really interesting blog on this. Oh, my brain hurts. I think it's a cannabis culture piece from 2003, 2004, something like that. I can't pull the journalist's name out my arse for shit, but I'm pretty sure there's a cannabis culture article that discusses the lineage of this, discusses how, what's his name, Sam the Skunk Man ended up with Guy Jeffrey and a few other sort of people, and yeah, there's a whole story and history to that. If I remember in a bit, I'm gonna have a look for that, and if I do find it, guys, I will share it on the Simpa Life Facebook page. But yeah, I'm sorry, I feel like my brain's just scrolling through paper in my head trying to figure out where I've seen this thing. There is a narrative out there somewhere that somebody's wrote, like a blog, that tells a narrative of it. Again, how true it is, the main elements that I remember reading in it, I've heard either then the people that have read this, it's hard to always tell, isn't it? Once something becomes a myth or an urban legend, it's perpetuated quite a lot, isn't it? God yeah. Dubs, I'm assuming your name's Dubs, not D-Ubs. Or D-Ubs is not the worst name in the world. I think it would be better to educate everyone spending hundreds on cannabis how they could set up a basic personal grow to be self-sufficient and try to make this more the norm. Yeah, I entirely agree, because the therapeutic benefits of cultivating your own cannabis, the empowerment, I'm gonna keep using it because it's in the dictionary now, damn it, so the Simpsons did something good. The embiggening that you feel from cultivating your own plant, from taking the autonomy of your health and setting up that thing, nurturing it, and every day having to check on it, growing it, and then drying it, and then curing it, and then enjoying it. The therapeutic benefit of that is as equally as powerful as the combination of the terpenes, the flavonoids, the cannabinoids, and the other minor compounds within it. That action, it's huge. It's fucking huge, man. It changed my fucking life. I had to have that relationship with cannabis and to have that relationship with the individual cultivars and know that from that tiny little thing, the potential it could give you, the weeks, months ahead of joy, of relief, of discovery, of self-exploration, of just enjoyment of being fucking high. You know what I mean? Right. I'm done, folks. I'm pretty tired. Thank you once again for joining me. For people that don't know, Monday's episode that will be out will feature the legend that is Mr. Tommy Chong. I fucking really enjoyed recording with him the other night. Yeah, you might see me for the first few seconds when he comes on screen. I'm a bit like, but I get there. It was great experience. Really enjoyed having him on. We're gonna have him on again in the future because there's quite a lot of subjects that we didn't get to cover. Obviously, he's Tommy Chong and he's lived a hell of a life, so to try and cover all of the things that we wanted to in an hour and a half is basically impossible. So wherever you are this evening, folks, I hope you have a good one. Please do, if you haven't already, check out simpalife.com, where we have various blogs. We have all of the previous podcasts you can listen to on the links there. We've updated the video section as well, so if you click on the video section, you'll be able to watch all of the previous episodes of the podcast. You can get exclusive early access from tomorrow to the Tommy John podcast if you become a patron at patreon.com/The Simpa Life. Find me basically everywhere at The Simpa Life, living my best Simpa life if possible. I've been Simpa. You've been wonderful.